All right, today we're stepping into what feels like a courtroom for a debate that's been going on for centuries. Now, our job here isn't to be the judge and jury. Instead, we're going to act like auditors, just looking at the logic of the arguments themselves. The case file, a really intense disagreement between a Shia and non-Shia scholar over the faith of a famous historical caliph. So, let's open it up and examine the evidence.
And this, right here, is the first major question that hits you. It's really the heart of the whole thing. I mean, think about it. If two people can't even agree on what counts as a valid source of truth, how do you even start the conversation? This isn't just a theological puzzle, it's about the fundamental rules of any good argument.
So the debate opens. The non-Shia scholar puts his first piece of evidence on the table. Let's call it Exhibit A, a verse from the Quran. His argument is pretty simple. This verse praises a whole group of people, the ones who believed, emigrated, and fought. The caliph they're debating, Umer, was part of that group. So case closed, right? The verse proves his faith and his high standing. Seems like a solid start.
But wait, the Shia scholar immediately hits the brakes. He doesn't argue with the verse itself. Of course not. He argues with how it's being used. He throws out a challenge to the logic itself. Does praising a group automatically mean that every single person in that group gets a pass? And just like that, the burden of proof is totally shifted. Now it's not about the group anymore. It's about proving the faith of this one specific person.
Okay, so, feeling the pressure to find some proof for the individual, the non-Shia scholar goes back to his library. He pulls out a couple of references from well-known historical texts in his tradition, Sunan al-Kubra and Mustadrak al-Hakim. He's trying to strengthen his position with some more specific accounts that, in his view, prove his point.
And this is where a really crucial, game-changing concept comes into play. The Shia scholar basically waves away this new evidence with one word: it's not hujjat. Now, hujjat is a super important idea in these kinds of debates. It doesn't just mean proof, it means binding proof. It's evidence that your opponent has to accept because it comes from a source you both agree is legitimate. It's the gold standard for admissible evidence. And this slide just lays it all out. You've got two totally different standards for what counts as evidence. The Shia scholar is saying, nope, it's got to be hujjat. We both have to accept the source. Meanwhile, the non-Shia scholar is using sources that are authoritative for him, but that his opponent completely rejects. In this courtroom of logic, that evidence just gets thrown out. It's inadmissible.
To really hammer the point home, the Shia scholar uses this incredibly sharp analogy. He says, a Hindu will also prove his God from his own book. And the logic there is just undeniable, isn't it? Of course a Hindu can find proof for their beliefs in Hindu scriptures. But would that ever be considered binding proof, hujjat, for a Muslim or a Christian? No way. It only counts if you already accept the authority of those books to begin with.
And what we're looking at here has a formal name in logic. It's called circular reasoning. You just can't use your own internal sources to prove your beliefs to someone on the outside. It's like saying, my club's rulebook is the best because rule number 1 in my rulebook says so. The argument just goes in a circle and never actually proves anything. The whole debate about texts has just hit a brick wall.
So, since the written evidence is at a standstill, the Shia scholar totally switches gears. He moves from arguing about books to arguing about behavior. The idea is, if we can't agree on what the texts say about a person's inner faith, maybe their outward actions can give us a clue. The audit now turns to the historical record of what people actually did.
So, the Shia scholar presents his counter-evidence. Let's call it Exhibit B. It's a specific historical event that's come to be known as the date-throwing incident. According to this story, the Caliph Umer, in a moment of anger or frustration, threw dates on the ground right in front of the Prophet Muhammad. And this is now being used as a direct challenge to the idea of his perfect, unwavering faith.
And this incident leads to a really pointed question. It's put out there directly. If your faith is so solid, if it's so true, why would you do something disrespectful, even a small thing, to the very prophet you're supposed to be following? The new argument is that actions can speak way louder than words from a disputed text. It's a direct challenge to whether the claimed belief matches the actual behavior.
Okay, so after being challenged on texts and on actions, the non-Shia scholar makes one last big, sweeping argument. He shifts the whole debate from personal faith to divine destiny. The justification for the Caliph is simply the fact that he was in power. The claim is that all leaders, all caliphs, are ultimately put there by God, so his rule itself is the ultimate proof that he was legitimate.
But the Shia scholar's rebuttal isn't theological, it's just historical.
He points out that the historical record, which they can actually agree on, shows that the first Caliph, Abu Bakr, is the one who appointed Umar to be his successor. This is a direct contradiction to the claim that God makes the appointment. One is a claim about divine will, the other is a well-documented political decision.
So let's just break this power argument down for a second. It's a simple, three-step piece of logic called a syllogism. Premise 1. All leaders are appointed by Allah. Premise 2. Umar was a leader. Conclusion. Therefore, Umar was appointed by Allah. I mean, on the surface, it sounds perfectly logical. But here's the catch with any argument like this. It's only as strong as its weakest link, which is usually the main premise.
And now, this is where the debate gets really interesting. The Shia scholar decides to do what any good auditor would do. He's going to stress test that main premise. He takes that core idea, that being in power means you were divinely appointed, and he applies it universally, outside of this one historical context, just to see if it holds up.
And to run this stress test, he picks two modern, powerful world leaders mentioned in the source debate, Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin. I mean, you can't deny they are powerful leaders. They hold immense authority. They are perfect test cases for this universal rule that power equals divine appointment.
And there it is, the checkmate question. If the premise is true, if all leaders get their power from a divine appointment by Allah, then logically you have to conclude that Netanyahu and Putin are also divinely appointed caliphs. You can see the trap, right? To say yes is a theological nightmare for any Muslim, but to say no is to admit that your original premise was wrong and your whole argument collapses.
And that is the exact moment the entire argument just falls apart. The non-Shia scholar is caught in a paradox he created himself. The logical conclusion of his own argument is something that his own core theology could never, ever accept. He can't defend the premise without basically tearing down his own belief system. The debate is effectively over.
So, after auditing that whole exchange, what are the big lessons? Well, first, whoever makes the claim has to be the one to prove it. That's the burden of proof. Second, your evidence is only as good as what your opponent is willing to accept. It has to be hujjat. Third, what people do can be used as powerful evidence to challenge what they say. And finally, the ultimate test of any argument. If following its logic leads you to a ridiculous, paradoxical conclusion, the argument itself is flawed.